Hello and welcome. You're watching NewsX with me, Devika Chopra. And today we will be discussing the Tamil Nadu State Archaeology Department, which has commenced the excavation at what is being proposed as a megalithic site in Sivagalai, which falls in the Tuticorin district of Tamil Nadu. The excavation, which was scheduled to begin in March, has been postponed due to restrictions of the COVID-19 lockdown. But according to several reports, the excavation at the Sivagalai site was initiated by A. Manikam, a history teacher from the village itself. Now, this is the first detailed excavation in Sivagalai, and it is hoped that the artifacts that will be discovered here will be really helpful to track the lives of the people who lived in this particular area centuries ago. Now, the interest in Sivagalai, in fact, began in 2015, when the same history teacher found similarities between the artifacts he found in Sivagalai and those that he found in the Adichanallur burial site. Manikam had found over 100 artifacts which showed signs of a similar civilization. But all of this is happening, of course, this is good news amidst the coronavirus crisis and the gloom and doom of the coronavirus crisis. Joining me in this special broadcast is Dr. V. Selvakumar, who's the Associate Professor and Head of Department at the Maritime History and Marine Archaeology of the Tamil Nadu University. Sir, thank you so much, firstly, for taking out time to speak to NewsX so that we can understand all of this better. I'm going to begin by asking you that what really is it that's the relevance of Sivagalai and Adichanallur?
Actually, if you look at South India about 1000 BCE, about 3000 years ago, you get a lot of these megalithic or Iron Age burial sites. People who were practicing agriculture and animal domestications were widely populated across South India. These people had the tradition of erecting burial for the dead, burials and monuments of different types you find all over South India. These two sites are falling in that context. We don't yet know whether they belong to 1000 BC time bracket or later. But in the case of Adichanallur, we know for sure because there are dates available. In the case of Sivagalai, we don't know. But these sites are very important in the sense that they have a lot of history hidden. If you look at the entire India, there are thousands and thousands of villages with archaeological record as historical document underneath. What is being argued by the researchers is that the history of India should be reconstructed from the village level. Right. So each and every village has an archive in the form of archaeological record underneath. Only when we excavate them and understand, we can completely, reconstruct Indian history. However, it is not possible to excavate all the sites because it would require a lot of time and money and resources. But these kind of sites which are already exposed and which are open to excavations can shed light on the past ways of life of the people. So in this context, they are important for understanding the development of history from the Iron Age down to the historical time, say from about 1000 BCE to 300 CE.
Absolutely. Dr. Selvakumar, I want this to be sort of an educational experience also for our viewers. So I'm going to be asking you to break down some terminologies for us and some processes for us so that we also learn with you. Now, these particular sites have been termed as megalithic. Could you explain this to our viewers? What does that mean?
Megalithic, actually, mega means large, lithic means stone. About 3000 years ago, South India, people had the tradition of erecting burials for the dead using large stones. The dead people were sometimes directly buried, sometimes the dead body was exposed or probably cremated or they were buried, and some select bones were kept in the burial, and then they created a monument. Probably they celebrated the death ritual. Even today, if you see after death of a person, after 16 days or 8 days or 12 days, or according to the tradition, people do some kind of offering. So similar kind of offering was done to the dead people.
All right.
And if you look at the megalithic monuments, they are of wide variety. Sometimes you find a large burial urn made of pottery, and that is buried along with the grave goods. Sometimes grave goods means whatever people offered for the dead. Sometimes probably they kept rice grains, but we in few cases get husk of the rice, and in other cases we don't get anything. They kept rice, or sometimes probably they offered water also, and they also offered them a red type of bead called cornelian bead. They kept iron objects, gold jewelry very rarely, and bronze object and everything. So it was a kind of offering for the dead.
All right.
And these burial types are of different size. You get terracotta sarcophagi in the form of an animal sometimes. In
Right.
Madras Museum, there is a sarcophagus in the form of a ram, a male goat, that was found at Shankavaram in Andhra Pradesh. So you get a similar kind of receptacle.
Right.
Sometimes they create a chamber by placing four stone slabs side by side and keeping a kind of slab on a top. And they may have a hole that is called cyst burial. Sometimes they are raised on the ground in the shape of a table. They are called dolmen. So you get several burial varieties: umbrella stones, menhir, tall stone, single stone, and you get very beautiful Tamil Nadu, Andhra, Kerala, Karnataka. Sometimes there are anthropomorphs in the form of a human figure, roughly a symbolic human figure there in Andhra Pradesh. So since these stones, they are called megalithic burials.
I'm glad that you've explained that to us in such great detail. Thank you so much for that explanation. But I also have to ask you, then, Professor, that what have been some of the exciting initial findings in these two particular sites and Adichanallur?
I didn't get it.
What are the initial findings? Something that's really perhaps excited the archaeologists as
Yeah,
well?
actually at Sivagalai they have found some urn burials and some beads and other materials. So Sivagalai has not been excavated
Properly.
enough. It is just started. But in the case of Adichanallur, they have found hundreds and hundreds of urn burials. They have found gold ornaments. Actually, it was excavated by Alexander Gray in early part of 20th century, and the findings are now kept in Madras Museum, and they have published, and they have found numerous artifacts, bronze objects, and gold diadems, which were probably worn on the head. So you get the complete material culture of the people. And probably they had external contacts also, because if you look at South India, we don't have enough copper. Though iron is available in large number, you get copper bronze objects which are probably imported. So you get to understand the complete material culture of the people, and also different types of ceramic vessels. Actually, in archaeology, there are two kinds of sites. One is habitation, one is burial sites. In the habitation sites, normally, you find that's a place where people live. So you get fragments of pottery. But the burials are special places. They are offerings. They are called as cash deposits, where people keep offerings as complete objects. That is why in the burial excavations, we get complete iron objects, complete metal, complete ceramic vessels, which we don't find in the case of other sites. For example, Kiradi is a habitation site. You don't get burial, but there is a nearby burial site. And at the site of habitation, you find architecture, wherever people lived and produced goods and objects and everything. In the case of burials, you get collective objects placed as offering for the dead. That is why in the burials, you get complete objects. Okay. So that's why they are very interesting. Yeah,
absolutely. And and I'm glad that you're raising these points, because then I just want to ask you as well, sir, once again, as a lay person who doesn't have as much knowledge as you do about the subject, that if you're saying that there are two separate sites that you view in archaeology as habitation and burial sites, then is it possible that some sort of a habitation site could also be linked to a close by burial site? So once you start excavating either one of the two, you then proceed to finding the other one as well.
Yeah, yes. In most cases, you have burial sites nearby the habitation site. But in some cases, it is difficult to locate. We don't know. If you look at South India, there are several sites where we don't have associated burial site. Probably these people were either nomadic or the archaeologists have not worked enough to identify these burial sites. For example, Kodumanal in your Erode is an important site where they have both burials and habitation nearby. And you get to know the complete base of life of the
Ways
people,
of
as well
life,
as
absolutely.
culture. Yeah.
Absolutely. Then, so that brings me to my next question. Now, some of the initial excavations at Adichanallur have shown, these really large constructions that are proper. You can see proper brickwork that is emerging from underneath, and very sophisticated infrastructure. So, does this, what does this really indicate? Are we looking at a very large, sophisticated, progressive civilization?
Actually, not in Adichanallur. These large brick structures were excavated at Kiradi near Madurai.
Absolutely.
Similar architectural remains have been excavated at Arikemedu near Pondicherry, and also Pattanam in Kerala, and several other Kaveri Pumpattinam and Arakankulam, and several other sites. Actually, what we are dealing with here is the earliest phase of urbanization within quote in South India. In history, we talk about urbanization where urban centers emerged. The India, the first phase of urbanization is associated with the Indus Valley civilization that flourished between the mature phase flourished between 2600 BC to 1900 BC. That was one. The second phase of urbanization in northern part of India emerged somewhere around 800 to 600 BC or even earlier. In southern India, we have slightly later, around 500 BC. Now the Kiradi excavation is probably revising that urbanization. One important point here is in the phase of urbanization, we get a different kind of settlements. What is known as urban centers emerge, and these centers developed interactions with foreign countries. For example, Indian Ocean countries. These towns functioned as some kind of market, small port, and special economic zones. At all these sites, like Arikemedu, Kiradi, or Pattanam in Kerala, and all over the Indian Ocean region, these settlements produce goods. They produce textile, iron, gold, some of them glass beads, some of them stone beads, and all the other organic remains like pepper and other goods were brought and they were exchanged. So these were actually nodes of trade centers, like what is today like Bombay or Kolkata or Chennai or Cochin ports. They were the ports about 2000 years ago. Interestingly, we get evidence for the contacts and connectivity as far as Egypt and then as far as Vietnam, because we get certain ceramics, pottery with the names in Tamil Brahmi at Bernike and also Kusir al-Qadim near the Red Sea coast. And we also have textual references like Periplus, Greek texts talking about these ports and this navigation. So people about 2000 years ago had extensive trade connections within the entire Indian Ocean, or what I call as Afro-Eurasian network. So people were well connected about 2000 years ago, and that represents the phase of first urbanization. That is a network that contributed to the development of these port towns, what we could call, some scholars call as proto-globalization. That were traveling extensively about 2000 years ago across the seas. They came from Red Sea down, they came to India. From India, they went to Southeast Asia. And this network is understood if you look at the material culture. You get very beautiful artifacts in India, objects like those are found in Rome or other region. So that is the connection and the network that contributed to the development. Not only the external connection, internal connections. Indians were traveling. If you look at Jataka stories and also early Tamil literature, it
Absolutely.
talks about Yamanas and other people traveling and interacting.
Absolutely. And I want to also ask you, sir, then, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but some of the reports also suggest that similar artifacts have been unearthed at the site, which is what led to, excavation processes beginning at Sivagalai in the first place. So what does that really indicate? Is there some sort of
Yeah, yeah, they have found some beads. I have seen some of the beads and black and red ware objects. So definitely suggesting that this site was contemporary to the other sites. You have only the excavation can tell us what kind of goods were produced. So that there were never several settlements all across Tamil Nadu. So Suvagalai is one of the sites. Similarly, Adichanallur is also one of these sites. But some of these sites like Kiradi or Adakankulam, and they were in the main node, the junction of the trade routes. So definitely Sivagalai findings are interesting. The excavation may tell us, what is underneath. So if you look at the material culture, it is similar to what is found in other sites like Arikamedu, Adakankulam, Kiradi. So definitely we may find something interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And and I'm so glad that we're having this conversation, because like I said, I'm getting to learn so much more, and I'm sure people interested are also learning so much more. But I also have to ask you then, so that excavations at sites like Kiladi, they pointed towards a very clear trade link, as well as perhaps a possible language link between the north and the south. And we've been having discussions and debates around the beginning of civilizations, of who the first Indian people were and how they lived and how they moved. Is there some sort of similar hopes for these two particular project sites? Because as you mentioned that they're actually burial sites. So is there something of a similar sort that could emerge from these sites as well?
Actually, if you look at the connections where as I said, the connection is with was with entire Afro-Eurasian world. People were connecting. If you look at the megalithic burials found in Tamil Nadu, you get cornelian beads. Generally, it is believed the source of good cornelian is in Gujarat. So these people actually, they have always interacted. They had the network of trade. Sometimes goods were, transported through intermediaries. So these connections within India existed at the site of Adahankulam. Other side, they have found the northern black polished ware. Some of the Tamil Brahmi inscriptions, they are also in Prakrit languages. Even if you look at the literature, like Kaudilya's Arthashastra talks about Pandya Kavadaka, people were the pearl and also shell produced from Pandya country, it was exported, and some of the clothes produced in Madurai region also were probably exported. So people were interacting. It is like exchanging goods. It always had happened. But we don't know when exactly these connections started. Normally, we have a time bracket of 500 BCE. But if you look at these connections, might have started much earlier. But we need to do further research.
Absolutely.
For example, take the case of the movement of Buddhism to Sri Lanka. So that is also an important link. We have the site of Kaveri Pumpattinam, which has evidence of Buddha Vigara, and the networks of connectivity. We have evidence of Jainism in Tamil Nadu. So Buddhism and Jainism are a clear pointer to the connectivity that happened all across India.
Absolutely.
So we need to understand more research.
And Professor, I also want to ask you, sometimes we perhaps don't understand the significance of these excavation projects for understanding our identity ourselves. So, what would then your message be to the people watching in terms of how this entire project that's going on is taking us perhaps an inch closer to maybe even establishing that India or this subcontinent could have been one of the world's grandest and one of the most sophisticated civilizations, a great civilizational hub of the past?
Yeah, in a sense, we can say we have evidence buried in all parts of India, in all the villages. They cannot be, just reconstructed without excavation. As I said already, each and every village has a history. Each and every village has an archive, what we call as archaeological, material cultural archive buried. So by systematically excavating and scientifically studying these material, we can reconstruct the history of India. It is not only about civilization, it is basically culture. People, how
Right.
people found the solution. People in fact did a lot of innovation. The way they were involved in agriculture, the way they were doing animal domestication, the way they produced a lot of handicrafts. Actually, people were in fact skillful. In this modern age, we don't have many skills, and these people were producing. Another important point that archaeology gives is archaeology should be considered as a cultural resource, and this can be used for bringing in social development in some areas. By creating museums at select spots, we can really support local tourism. Tourism, not in the very harsh sense, as sustainable tourism, heritage education oriented initiatives where students can be taught about history through these museums. In a way, archaeology can contribute to local development in certain areas. So in that way, archaeology can contribute to social development and also for heritage education, so that children understand history in a more accurate and scientific way.
And I'm glad that you say that, because as we're chatting, I'm also thinking that it could also lead to economic opportunities for people currently living in those great hubs of archaeology, for them to be employed to help in the excavation work, etc. And I'll come to that in just a moment, because just the last couple of questions with you. So I want to ask you that you said that of course due to lack of time and lack of resources, all archaeological sites cannot be excavated, and that's fair enough. But are there any particular sites that perhaps the archaeological community has been talking about that's not getting as much attention as it should? If you'd like to raise that through this particular medium.
Yeah. Actually, in India, the concept of archaeology and archaeological research, these two things were introduced mainly due to the colonial intervention. It all started with the founding of Asiatic Society of Bengal in 1784, and then later on 1814 Indian Museum came up, and then Archaeological Survey of India was initiated, and a lot of research took place. So for till about the late half of the 20th century, scholars were focusing only on archaeology and excavation. The concept of heritage management, the idea of utilizing archaeological resources and taking it to the public and developing museums and perceiving archaeology as a cultural resource that can contribute to development did not emerge. So, so we need to do more to take archaeology to the people, to make archaeological research more relevant to the public, and especially some of the ideas, some of the technologies that we find in archaeology can be used as a good tool for heritage education and also for developing skill. There is a concept of applied archaeology. We have not really invested enough energy to work on applied archaeology. How can we make archaeology more relevant to the public? How can we use archaeological knowledge for the contemporary relevance? For example, if you take the irrigation technology of medieval times, the way people were caring the environment, there are several lessons to be learned, but we need to do proper systematic research so that they can be applied to the contemporary society's development in a meaningful way. So we need to focus on developing these kind of museums and development-oriented cultural heritage management resources. Absolutely. That perspectives need to come, and also it should be part of the syllabus. School and college and university.
And Professor, I'm glad that you raised that point, because like I said, I mean, even my interest in all of these subjects has only been very recent. It's not as though my school contributed a lot to that, but our our heritage and our culture is so rich once you start reading up on it, and there's just so much. There are excavations happening all across India, and there's just so much rich information that's coming out, which is not perhaps reaching the students as it should, to generate a sort of interest at a young age. And I'm glad that you're raising all of these points, and perhaps we can have a different conversation at another point in time to figure out how is it that we can make archaeology less dry and more relevant to the younger generation. But before I let you go, sir, I just have to ask you one last question. Is there any sort of particular request that you'd like to make to, say, the authorities or the governments in terms of protection of these sites as well? So what we've seen is that there has been a very clear push in terms of excavating more and more sites, and we see that money is now slowly being released for those projects, but a lot of complaints continue to come in of how once excavated, it's a larger and a longer, lengthier process in terms of protecting what we found.
Yeah, I think we need some clear-cut national level policies, and also each state of India should develop clear-cut heritage management policies. So that is very important, and also try to incorporate culture, archaeology as a resource, and incorporate these subject, archaeology, epigraphy, and others in the school as well as in the college, university curricula. So we need clear-cut policies, and also involvement of different agencies like city corporations and local bodies, and other agencies can contribute to the development of museums, at least in strategic areas. So develop museums. There is no point in developing museums everywhere. So that should be some plan and perspectives wherever there are limited attraction. For example, Kanyakumari is an excellent tourist destination. That can be a good museum displaying the Indian history and cultural development. Similarly, we have dams and other attractions. So we can create some kind of tourist attractions in areas where people visit, create very attractive museums. And also some site museums, sites like Archimedu can be developed. If you visit many of the Western countries, other countries, they have created fantastic museums. So we have rich culture, but the way we display and the way we create attractions or educate people through these museums need to be developed. So we need a different approach in taking these exhibits to the public in an attractive and entertaining, at the same time educative manner. So we need to put our brains into this, so that the concept of archaeology and heritage management and cultural resources can be taken to the public.
Absolutely. So you've completely, hit the nail on its head with that sort of a conclusion to our entire conversation. And thank you so much, Dr. Selvakumar, for having this conversation.
Thank you.
Like I said, I have been, thoroughly educated through this, and I hope that the viewers would feel the same way as well. And as Professor was also pointing out, that while we continue the work and a lot is yet to emerge, we also have to now start putting our brains together to figure out how do we preserve and present this rich culture. We're constantly talking about, the lack of jobs, unemployment, and uninterested youth in our country. But these are all aspects where they can all be engaged. So I'm so glad that Professor here could join us to take this conversation forward. And thank you so much, viewers, for watching.
Thank you.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.